The transmission came through at 600 hours, and it woke every senior officer on the Earth ship Unity. Captain Daniel Hayes was drinking his morning coffee when the communications officer rushed onto the bridge, her face pale and her hands shaking slightly as she carried the data tablet. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she said. Hayes took the tablet and read the message. Then he read it again. His coffee went cold in his cup as he processed what he was seeing. The message came from the Galactic Council itself, the ancient coalition of 12 species that ruled most of the known universe. They were summoning Earth to appear before them, not inviting, not requesting, summoning. The Unity was 3 days from Meridian Point, a neutral station that floated in the space between star systems. Hayes had been planning to stop there for supplies and to meet with a few friendly alien traders who had been helping humanity understand galactic politics. Now those plans meant nothing. The Council demanded Earth send representatives within 10 solar cycles, or face consequences that the message described in disturbing detail. Hayes called his senior staff to the conference room. Lieutenant Amy Brooks arrived first. She was young, only 28, but she had studied alien cultures and languages her entire adult life. She was the best cultural advisor Earth had, which was why she was on this mission. Ryan Mitchell came next, the security chief, a former Marine who stood over 6 feet tall and seemed to always be ready for trouble. Finally, Lisa Graham entered, the science officer who had a mind for details that Hayes had learned to trust completely. "Read this," Hayes said, sliding the tablet across the table. The 3 officers read in silence. Hayes watched their expressions change from curiosity to concern, to something close to anger. When they finished, Brooks spoke first. "This is worse than we thought," she said. "I've been studying the Galactic Council for years. They don't summon species unless they plan to force them into submission." "What exactly are they demanding?" Mitchell asked. Brooks pulled up another file on her own tablet. "I've been tracking rumors about something called the Accords of Compliance. Every species that joins the galactic community has to sign them. I've tried to get a copy for months, but it's kept secret until the signing ceremony." "Why secret?" Graham asked. "Because if species knew what was in them, they might refuse," Brooks answered. "I've pieced together some information from species who were willing to talk. The Accords require new species to surrender military control, open their planets to resource extraction, and accept what the Council calls a guidance government." Hayes felt his jaw tighten. "A guidance government?" "Overseers," Brooks said flatly. "Other species watching everything we do, making sure we follow Council rules for at least 500 years. The room fell silent. Mitchell was the one who finally spoke. "That's not joining a community. That's becoming a colony." "Exactly," Brooks agreed. Hayes stood and walked to the window that looked out at the stars streaming past. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. It had been the greatest accomplishment in human history. They had reached out to the galaxy with hope and excitement, ready to join a community of peaceful species who would welcome them. Instead, they found something else. The galaxy was not the peaceful federation they had imagined. It was a hierarchy, with the old species at the top and everyone else serving them. The Council maintained order through overwhelming military force and economic control. Species who refused to cooperate were cut off from trade routes and left to struggle alone. Most simply accepted the terms rather than face isolation. But humanity had not come this far to surrender their freedom without even a fight. "Get me a quantum link to Earth," Hayes ordered. "I need to speak with President Carter." The quantum communication system was new technology, allowing instant communication across light years. It was expensive and used rarely, but this situation demanded it. Within minutes, Hayes was speaking directly with the President of Earth's unified government. Helen Carter listened to his report without interrupting. She was in her second term as president, and Hayes had always respected her ability to stay calm under pressure. When he finished explaining the situation, she was quiet for a long moment. "Captain Hayes, how much time do we have before the deadline?" she asked. 7 days to reach Meridian Point, then we're expected to appear before the Council immediately." "And if we refuse to go?" Brooks leaned forward to answer. "Madam President, they'll blockade our system. They control the main trade routes. Without access to certain resources, we can't produce ourselves yet. Earth's expansion into space will stop." We'll be trapped in our own solar system. Hayes watched the president's face on the screen. He could see her thinking, weighing options. Finally, she spoke again. Captain, I'm calling an emergency session of the World Council. We'll need a few hours to discuss this, but I want you to continue to Meridian Point. Don't let them think we're running scared. Understood, Madam President. And Captain, if we do decide to attend this meeting, you'll represent Earth. We're giving you full authority to make decisions on behalf of humanity. Choose wisely. The connection ended. Hayes looked at his team. The weight of what the president had just said settled over all of them. One person, making decisions that would affect the entire human species. It seemed impossible. It seemed unfair. But someone had to do it. The Unity continued toward Meridian Point. Over the next 6 hours, Hayes received reports from Earth about the emergency council session. Every nation on Earth was debating the situation. Some leaders argued they should negotiate, try to get better terms. Others insisted that signing any agreement that surrendered their freedom was unacceptable. A few even suggested they should refuse to attend the meeting at all. Brooke spent those hours researching everything she could find about the Council and the Accords. What she discovered was disturbing. She found records of species who had signed the Accords centuries ago. Many of them had essentially become labor colonies, their resources extracted to benefit the Council species while their own people struggled. Their cultures had been slowly erased, replaced with whatever the Council deemed acceptable. Mitchell reviewed military intelligence. The Council's combined fleet was enormous, thousands of ships representing technology that was centuries ahead of humanity's. If it came to war, Earth would lose. There was no question about that. Graham analyzed the economic data. Without access to Council trade routes, humanity could survive but would struggle to grow. Many of the materials needed for advanced technology came from planets that were under Council control. Earth could develop alternatives eventually, but it would take decades. Every angle they examined led to the same conclusion. Refusing the Council would be hard. It would mean sacrifice. It would mean struggle. But accepting their terms meant giving up everything that made humanity free. 7 days later, the Unity arrived at Meridian Point. The station was massive, a city in space that housed thousands of different species. Ships from across the galaxy were docked there, and as the Unity approached, Hayes could see many of them watching. Word had spread that Earth was being summoned before the Council. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Hayes had received his final orders from Earth just an hour before. President Carter had made her decision, and the World Council had voted. Earth would attend the meeting. They would listen to what the Council had to say, but they would not sign away their freedom without making their position clear. As the Unity docked at Meridian Point, Hayes gathered his team one final time. Whatever happens in that council chamber, he said, we represent every human being who has ever lived. We speak for those who fought for freedom in the past, and those who will fight for it in the future. We will not be intimidated. We will not surrender our dignity. Understood? Understood, sir, they answered together. Hayes stood and straightened his uniform. It was time to meet the Galactic Council. It was time to show them what humanity was made of. He had no idea that the single word he would speak in that chamber would change the galaxy forever. The doors of the Unity opened, and the human delegation stepped out into a new chapter of their species' history. The escort arrived exactly 1 hour after the Unity docked. 6 tall figures wearing armor that seemed to shimmer with its own light stood at the airlock door. They were Zarkesh, the insectoid species that served as the Council's enforcers. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Hayes could see their multiple eyes glowing behind the transparent visors. Captain Daniel Hayes, one of them said through a translator device, you and your delegation will come with us. There was no pleas, no politeness, just a command. Hayes exchanged a glance with Brooks, Mitchell, and Graham. They had discussed this moment. The Council wanted to intimidate them from the very beginning. They would not let it work. Lead the way, Hayes said calmly. The walk through Meridian Point took 20 minutes. The station's corridors were filled with aliens of every description. Some were humanoid. Others were so strange that Hayes had trouble understanding how they even moved. Many stopped to stare as the human delegation passed. Some whispered among themselves. A few looked at the humans with what might have been sympathy. They entered a transport tube that carried them to the central section of the station. When the doors opened, Hayes found himself looking at the council chamber. He had seen pictures, but they had not prepared him for the reality. The chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high above that it disappeared into darkness. The walls were made of some material that constantly shifted colors, creating patterns that hurt to look at for too long. In the center of the room was a small platform, surrounded by 12 massive seats arranged in a circle. Each seat was designed for a different species, and each was positioned higher than the platform in the center. "They want us to look up at them," Brooks whispered. "Classic intimidation." "It's working," Graham muttered back. The Zarkesh guards directed them to the central platform. As they took their positions, Hayes looked around at the seats. They were filling up now. The 12 council members were arriving, each making a grand entrance designed to impress and intimidate. The Zarkesh representative was the first to take their seat. The insectoid being was larger than the guards, at least 9 feet tall, with armor that looked like it was part of their body. They settled into their seat and turned their multiple eyes toward the humans. Next came the Velthari, creatures made of pure energy contained within specially designed suits. They flickered and pulsed with light as they moved, and their voice when they spoke sounded like music and thunder combined. The other council members arrived one by one. Each was stranger than the last. Some were species that humans had encountered before. Others were completely unknown. But all of them had one thing in common. They looked at the human delegation as if they were examining insects under a microscope. The last to arrive were the Chronos. They were the eldest species in the council, having existed for over 50,000 years. They looked almost human, except their skin was silver, and their eyes were completely black. They moved slowly, as if every action required great thought. When the Chronos representative took their seat, they stared at Hayes with an expression that might have been contempt. "The council is assembled," a voice boomed through the chamber. Hayes looked around for the source and realized it came from everywhere at once. "The species known as humanity has been summoned to answer for their presence in galactic space." Chancellor Vormak rose from one of the seats. He was a Velthari, and his energy form pulsed bright as he addressed the chamber. "Humanity, you are young. You are primitive. You have achieved faster than light travel through luck and determination, but you do not understand the galaxy you have entered." Hayes kept his expression neutral, but inside he was angry. Being called primitive by beings who judged species by their age rather than their achievements was insulting. "The galaxy operates according to laws that were established long before your species. Learn to make fire," Vormak continued. "These laws maintain peace. They prevent chaos. They ensure that every species knows their place and their purpose." The Zarkesh representative spoke next. Their voice was harsh, like gravel grinding. "We are the enforcers of order. We have protected the galaxy for 10,000 years. Every species that wishes to travel the stars must accept our protection." "Protection from what?" Mitchell whispered. Brooks shook her head slightly, warning him to stay quiet. The Chronos representative stood. Unlike Vormak, they did not raise their voice. They simply spoke, and somehow everyone heard them clearly. Young species always believe they are special. They believe their brief existence has given them wisdom. They are always wrong. Hayes clenched his fists but said nothing. "You will now hear the terms of the Accords of Compliance," Vormak announced. A holographic display appeared above the central platform. Text began scrolling past, written in thousands of languages simultaneously. Hayes found the English version and began reading. What he saw confirmed everything Brooks had warned about. The Accords required Earth to surrender control of its military forces to Council oversight. All decisions about war and peace would be made by the Council. Earth's resources, from minerals to water to even human labor, would be available for extraction by Council species. A guidance government consisting of Council representatives would be established on Earth to ensure compliance with all regulations. The Accords would remain in effect for a minimum of 500 years. After that time, Earth could petition for full membership in the Council, but approval was not guaranteed. Until then, humanity would have no vote, no say in galactic affairs, and no real freedom. "These terms are non-negotiable," Vormak said. "Every species that travels the stars must accept them. There are no exceptions." Hayes looked at Brooks. She had gone pale reading the document. Graham was shaking her head slowly. Mitchell looked like he wanted to punch something. "You have 1 hour to consult among yourselves. the Kronos representative said. When you return, you will sign the accords, and humanity will take its proper place in the galactic order. The Zarkesh guards stepped forward to escort them out. Hayes and his team were taken to a small waiting room. As soon as the door closed behind them, Mitchell exploded. "This is slavery," he said. "They're not offering membership. They're demanding we become servants." "It's worse than that," Brooks said quietly. She pulled up files on her tablet. "I've been researching species that signed these accords. The Talvans signed them 300 years ago. Today their home world is a mining colony. The population has dropped by 70%. Their language is dying out. Their culture exists only in museums. The council erased them," Graham said. "Slowly," Brooks agreed. "Over generations. They do it to every species that signs. They take everything valuable and leave just enough to keep the species alive and working." Hayes sat down heavily. He thought about Earth. He thought about the billions of people living their lives unaware that their entire future was being decided right now. He thought about human history, all the times people had fought against tyranny and oppression. Humanity had not survived wars, plagues, and countless disasters just to surrender to aliens who saw them as nothing more than resources to be exploited. "We need to contact Earth," Hayes said. They established a quantum link to President Carter. She was in the Situation Room with her advisors. Hayes explained what the accords actually contained. He described the other species that had been erased by signing them. He laid out the terrible choice facing humanity. "If we refuse," Hayes said, "they'll isolate us. We'll be cut off from the galaxy. Our expansion into space will slow to a crawl. We'll struggle for decades, maybe centuries. And if we sign," Carter asked, "we'll cease to exist as a free species. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. They'll erase everything that makes us human." The president was quiet for a long moment. Hayes could see her thinking, weighing impossible options. Finally, she spoke. "Captain Hayes, I'm going to tell you something that every person in this room already knows. Humanity has always faced impossible choices. We've always been told that resistance is futile, that we should accept our fate, that fighting will only make things worse." She leaned closer to the camera. "And we have always chosen to fight anyway. We've chosen freedom over safety. We've chosen dignity over survival, because a life without freedom isn't life at all." Hayes felt something in his chest. It was fear and pride mixed together. "You have my full support, Captain," Carter said. "Whatever you decide to say to that council, Earth stands behind you." The connection ended. Hayes looked at his team. They all knew what was coming. They all knew the consequences. But none of them looked afraid anymore. "It's time," Brooks said, checking her watch. They walked back to the council chamber. The gallery was full now. Hundreds of species had gathered to watch. Some were curious. Some were hoping to see humanity humiliated. A few looked like they were hoping for something else entirely. The human delegation took their place on the central platform once more. The 12 council members looked down at them. Vormak's energy form pulsed with satisfaction. "Have you reached your decision?" he asked. Hayes stepped forward. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Chancellor Vormak stood before the assembled council, his energy form pulsing with what Hayes had learned to recognize as satisfaction. The 12 council members sat in their elevated seats, looking down at the human delegation like judges preparing to pass sentence. Around the chamber, in galleries that stretched up the walls, hundreds of alien species watched in silence. Captain Daniel Hayes of Earth. Vormak's voice resonated through the chamber, carried by speakers and translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "You have reviewed the accords of compliance. You have consulted with your people. The time for decision has come." Hayes stood straight, his hands clasped behind his back. Brooks, Mitchell, and Graham stood beside him, forming a small line of humans against the might of the galactic order. He could feel every eye in the chamber watching him. "I will ask you now, in the presence of these witnesses with the authority granted by your world," Vormak continued, his form brightening with each word, "do you, on behalf of your species and your world, accept the terms of the Accords of Compliance and submit to the authority of the Galactic Council?" The silence that followed was complete. Hayes could hear his own heartbeat. He thought about President Carter and her words about humanity always choosing freedom. He thought about every human who had ever lived and died for the simple right to be free. He thought about the future, about children not yet born who deserved to grow up in a world that belonged to them. Hayes took a breath and spoke one word. No. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. The word echoed through the vast chamber, translated instantly into every language known to the galaxy. No. Refusal. Denial. Defiance. Then the chaos began. The Zarkesh representative lunged forward in their seat, their armored body clattering with the sudden movement. What did you say? They demanded, their voice a harsh screech even through the translator. I said no, Hayes repeated, his voice steady and calm. Humanity refuses your terms. Vormak's energy form flickered wildly, colors shifting from blue to red to something that hurt to look at. You mean refuse? Do you understand what you have done? No species has ever. Then we're the first, Hayes interrupted. The gallery erupted in noise. Some species were shouting in alarm. Others made sounds that might have been approval or might have been mockery. Hayes couldn't tell. The Kronos representative rose slowly from their seat. Unlike the others, they seemed almost calm. That frightened Hayes more than the shouting. Young human, the Kronos said, their black eyes fixed on Hayes. You do not comprehend the magnitude of your mistake. The Accords are not a request. They are not an invitation. They are the law of this galaxy. Then your law's wrong, Hayes replied. A wave of shock passed through the chamber. Hayes could see alien species recoiling from his words. Brooks touched his arm gently, a warning to be careful. But Hayes shook his head slightly. There was no going back now. We came to the stars hoping to find friends, Hayes continued, raising his voice so everyone could hear. We hoped to join a community of peaceful species to learn and grow together. Instead, we found a system built on dominance and submission. You found order, Vormak shouted. You found peace. We found tyranny, Hayes shot back. You call it protection, but it's control. You call it guidance, but it's erasure. We've read about the species that signed your accords. We know what happens to them. Their cultures disappear. Their people become nothing more than workers and resources. That's not peace. That's slow extinction. The Zarkesh representative was on their feet now, all 9 feet of armored bulk moving toward the edge of their platform. You dare to insult this council? You dare to reject the order that has maintained galactic peace for millennia? Mitchell stepped forward, putting himself between Hayes and the angry alien. The Zarkesh enforcer noticed and made a sound like grinding metal. 4 guards moved from the edges of the chamber toward the human delegation. Captain Hayes, another council member spoke up. This one was a Felshar, a species that resembled a massive crab with too many eyes. Perhaps you do not understand the consequences of refusal. Allow me to explain them clearly. The holographic display above the platform changed. Now it showed Earth's solar system, with lines indicating trade routes and resource flows. If you refuse the accords, you will be declared an outlaw species, the Felshar explained in a voice that bubbled and hissed. All trade with Earth will cease immediately. All council species will be forbidden from entering your system. You will receive no aid, no technology, no resources. Your expansion into the galaxy will end before it has truly begun. We understand, Hayes said. Do you? The Felshar's many eyes focused on him. Your species has been in space for barely a generation. You rely on materials you cannot produce, technology you cannot replicate. Without council trade, your colonies will struggle. Your economy will suffer. In 10 years, perhaps 20, you will come back to us begging to sign the accords. And the terms will be much worse. Brooks spoke up for the first time. You're describing a siege. You're threatening to starve us into submission. We are describing reality, Vormak said. His energy form had stabilized, but it pulsed with anger. The galaxy does not tolerate chaos. Species that refuse to join the order are isolated until they see reason. It has always been this way. Then it's time for that to change, Hayes said. The Kronos representative laughed. It was a cold sound, empty of humor. Change? You think one primitive species can change the order of the galaxy? We are 50,000 years old. We have seen species like yours rise and fall like waves on a shore. You are nothing. You will achieve nothing. And when you fail, when you return to us broken and desperate, we will remember this moment of arrogance. Hayes felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting emotional now would accomplish nothing. Instead, he looked around the chamber at all the species watching. Many of them looked afraid. A few looked angry. But some, just a few, looked interested. We might be young, Hayes said, addressing not just the council but everyone in the gallery. We might be primitive by your standards. But we understand something that you seem to have forgotten. Freedom matters. Dignity matters. The right to determine your own future matters more than comfort or safety. Beautiful words, Vormak said dismissively. They will not keep your people fed when your colonies run out of supplies. They will not prevent your economy from collapsing. Words cannot protect you from the consequences of your pride. Maybe not, Hayes agreed, but they're still true, and we're not the only ones who think so. He gestured to the gallery. Look around this chamber. How many of the species watching us right now signed your accords because they wanted to? How many signed because they felt they had no choice? How many of them remember what it felt like to be free? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The Zarkesh enforcer made an angry gesture, and the guards moved closer to the humans. You will not spread dissent among the species under our protection, the Zarkesh snarled. Protection? Mitchell spoke up, his voice hard. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like occupation. Enough. Vormak's form blazed brightly. This debate is over. Captain Hayes, you have refused the accords. By the laws of this council, you and your species are hereby declared outlaws. You have 1 solar day to leave Meridian Point. Any human vessel found in council space after that time will be seized. Any attempt to trade with council species will be met with military force. Hayes nodded slowly. We understand. But before we leave, I want to invoke the right of standing. The chamber fell silent again. Even Vormak's energy form seemed to freeze. Brooks grabbed Hayes' arm, her eyes wide with surprise. They had discussed this possibility, but she had argued against it. It was too dangerous. You know of the right of standing? The Kronos representative asked quietly. I do, Hayes confirmed. It's an ancient law older than the accords themselves. Any species that refuses submission must be given the chance to prove their worthiness through action. You cannot declare us outlaws without granting us that right. The council members looked at each other. Hayes could see they were not happy, but they also knew he was correct. The right of standing was written into the oldest galactic laws, created in a time before the council had become so dominant. Very well, Vormak said finally. We grant you the right of standing. You have 1 standard year to demonstrate that humanity deserves recognition as a free species. If you fail, the judgment against you will stand and it will be absolute. And if we succeed? Hayes asked. You won't, the Kronos representative said with complete certainty. But in the impossible event that you do, the Council will be forced to recognize Earth as an independent power. You will be granted the right to exist outside the Accords. Hayes looked at his team. Brooks looked terrified but determined. Mitchell looked ready for a fight. Graham just nodded once. We accept those terms, Hayes said. The Zarkesh enforcer leaned forward. Understand this, human. In that year, we will be watching. We will be waiting. And when you fail, when your people suffer because of your pride, we will make sure every species in this galaxy knows that defiance leads only to destruction. You're welcome to try, Hayes replied. The council dismissed them with no further ceremony. The Zarkesh. The journey back to Earth took 5 days, and every one of those days brought new complications. The Unity's communication system was constantly active, receiving messages from across the galaxy. Some were threats from council species promising destruction. Others came from smaller species transmitted in secret, asking questions that all boiled down to the same thing. Did humanity really believe they could resist the council? Hayes spent most of his time in the communications room, reading these messages with Brooks by his side. She had become invaluable at understanding the nuances of alien communication. A message that seemed neutral might actually be a coded offer of support. A threatening message might hide sympathy beneath aggressive words. This one's interesting, Brooks said, highlighting a transmission. It's from a species called the Thelnari. They signed the Accords about 100 years ago. This message officially condemns our actions. But look at the way it's written. They're using formal language that in their culture actually expresses admiration. So they support us but can't say it openly. Hayes understood. Exactly. The Council monitors all communications. Species that signed the Accords aren't allowed to support resistance, but they're finding ways to let us know they're watching and hoping. Mitchell entered the room, carrying a data pad that showed security reports. We've got another problem. 3 Council patrol ships have been shadowing us since we left Meridian Point. They're staying just at the edge of sensor range, but they're definitely tracking us. The Zarkesh wanting to make sure we're actually leaving, Hayes guessed. More than that, Mitchell replied. I think they're gathering intelligence. They're scanning us constantly, probably trying to learn everything they can about our technology, our weapons, our capabilities. Let them look, Hayes said. They're going to see what we can do soon enough anyway. Graham joined them, looking exhausted. She had been analyzing data nonstop since they left Meridian Point. I've been studying the Council's military capabilities based on everything we've observed. Captain, I need to be honest with you. If they decide to attack Earth, we can't win, not with our current fleet. I know, Hayes said quietly. Our ships are faster than theirs in some ways, but their weapons are far more powerful. Their shields can absorb hits that would destroy our vessels, and they have thousands of ships. We have at best a few hundred combat-capable vessels. So what you're saying is we need to change the equation, Brooks suggested. How? Graham asked. That was the question that occupied Hayes's mind for the rest of the journey. How did a primitive species stand against an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years? Raw military strength wouldn't work. They couldn't out-technology species that had been developing for millennia. Traditional warfare would be suicide. They needed something else. They needed to be unexpected. The Unity entered Earth's solar system on the 6th day. Hayes stood on the bridge looking at the blue-green planet that was home to 8 billion humans. From this distance, it looked peaceful, beautiful, fragile. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command, the communications officer reported. You're cleared for immediate docking at the orbital station. The President wants to see you as soon as you arrive. 2 hours later, Hayes and his team were in the White House Situation Room. President Carter sat at the head of the table, surrounded by her advisors, military commanders, and scientific experts. Every screen in the room showed different data: fleet positions, resource inventories, intelligence reports about Council movements. Captain Hayes, Carter greeted him. Welcome home. I wish it was under better circumstances. Thank you, Madam President. Hayes took a seat across from her. I assume you've been briefed on everything that happened at Meridian Point. We watched it live, one of the military commanders said. His name was Kevin Price, an admiral who commanded Earth's defense fleet. Every species with a transmitter was broadcasting your conversation with the Council. Half the galaxy saw you tell them no. And how is Earth reacting? Hayes asked. Carter pulled up a screen showing social media, news reports, and public opinion polls. Mixed. About 40% of the population is celebrating. They see this as humanity standing up for itself. 30% are terrified that we just started a war we can't win. The remaining 30% aren't sure what to think yet. What about the other nations? Brooks asked. United, surprisingly, Carter replied. Every major nation on Earth has pledged support for our decision. Even countries that usually disagree on everything are standing together on this. Whatever else happens, humanity is facing this crisis as one species. Admiral Price leaned forward. Captain, let me be direct. You've bought us 1 year to prove we deserve recognition as a free species. But the Council has been very clear about what happens if we fail. They'll isolate us, cut off our trade, and make an example of us to any other species thinking about resistance. How do we prevent that? Hayes looked at Graham, who pulled up her analysis on one of the screens. We can't win a conventional war, she said bluntly. The Council's combined military is too large, too advanced, too experienced. If they send their full fleet against us, Earth will fall within weeks. The room fell silent. Several of the advisors looked sick. However, Graham continued, they won't send their full fleet. They can't. The Council controls dozens of systems across the galaxy. If they pull all their forces to attack us, those systems become vulnerable. They have enemies, species they've oppressed who would love a chance to rebel. So we need to make them think we're more dangerous than we actually are, Mitchell understood. Exactly, Graham agreed. We need to make them believe that attacking Earth would cost them more than they're willing to pay. One of Carter's advisors spoke up. How do we do that? We don't have secret weapons. We don't have hidden fleets. No, Hayes said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. But we have something they don't expect. We have humanity's history of innovation under pressure. We've always been at our best when facing impossible odds. Over the next 3 months, Earth transformed itself into a fortress. Every shipyard, every factory, every available resource was dedicated to one goal: survival. The military worked around the clock designing new vessels and weapons. Scientists developed technology, not by slowly advancing knowledge, but by taking wild leaps based on desperation and necessity. Admiral Price took command of the fleet expansion project. "We can't build ships as advanced as the Council's," he told his staff. "So we build more of them, many more. We overwhelm them with numbers." The Earth orbital yards, which had previously produced one ship per month, were rebuilt to produce one per day. It seemed impossible, but human engineers made it work through automation, simplified designs, and sheer determination. The new vessels weren't pretty. They weren't sophisticated, but they were functional and armed. Mitchell led the development of new defensive systems. "The Council expects us to fight like they do," he explained. "Space battles with ships lined up firing at each other. We need to think differently." His team began working on unconventional weapons, mines that looked like space debris, automated drones that could swarm enemy vessels, projectile weapons that used simple physics instead of complex energy systems. None of it was elegant, but it didn't need to be. Brooks became Earth's ambassador to the other species of the galaxy. Using secure channels and hidden messages, she reached out to every species that had shown even the slightest sympathy to humanity's cause. She didn't ask for military support. Instead, she asked for information. "Tell us about the Council's weaknesses," she would say. "Tell us about their fears. Tell us what makes them hesitate." And slowly, carefully, dozens of species began to share what they knew. The Council wasn't as united as they appeared. The Zarkesh and the Velthari had ancient tensions that occasionally erupted into conflict. The Chronos were powerful but slow to make decisions. The Council's structure, which had seemed like an unbreakable monolith, actually had cracks. Meanwhile, Hayes worked with Graham and Earth scientists on the most audacious project of all. They called it the deterrent. "If the Council attacks us and we're clearly losing," Hayes explained to President Carter, "we need something that makes them stop. Something so dangerous to them that they'd rather negotiate than continue fighting." The deterrent wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was information. A virus designed not to harm computer systems, but to spread forbidden knowledge. Information about the Council's crimes. About how they had erased species and exploited worlds. Broadcasting equipment that would transmit this information to every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. "If they destroy us," Hayes said, "we'll make sure every species in the galaxy knows the truth about them. We'll expose what the Accords really mean. It won't save us, but it might inspire others to resist." Carter looked at the plans and nodded slowly. "A final message to the galaxy. Our last act of defiance. Hopefully we won't need it," Hayes said. "But if we do, we'll make it count." As the 3-month mark approached, word reached Earth that the Council was mobilizing. A fleet was being assembled ostensibly for routine exercises, but intelligence suggested otherwise. The Zarkesh were pushing for military action. They wanted to make an example of. The alert came at 0400 hours on a Tuesday morning, 3 months and 2 days after Hayes had spoken his single word of defiance. Admiral Kevin Price was already awake, had been for hours when the sensor stations detected the incoming fleet. He had been expecting this moment, had prepared for it, but seeing the actual numbers still made his blood run cold. 1,500 ships. The Council had sent 1,500 warships to Earth's solar system. Price stood in the command center of the orbital defense station, surrounded by screens showing every angle of the approaching fleet. His staff worked quietly around him, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and determination that he felt. "Time to engagement?" he asked. "At their current speed, they'll reach the edge of our defensive perimeter in 6 hours, a young tactical officer replied. "Sound general quarters. Get every ship to battle stations. I want all defensive platforms online and every minefield armed. And someone wake up Captain Hayes." Hayes was already awake. He had been sleeping in quarters on the defense station for the past week, knowing this moment would come. When the call came through, he was dressed and in the command center within 5 minutes. Brooks, Mitchell, and Graham were right behind him. "Show me," Hayes said as he entered. Price brought up the tactical display. The Council fleet appeared as a mass of red dots approaching from deep space. They weren't trying to hide. They weren't being subtle. This was a show of overwhelming force designed to make Earth surrender before the first shot was fired. 1,500 ships, Price said. "They're maintaining a standard battle formation. The Zarkesh warships are at the front, probably expecting to do most of the fighting. Velthari support vessels are in the middle, and the command ships are at the rear. They're expecting us to fold immediately, Mitchell observed. This is intimidation, not strategy. What are we showing them? Hayes asked. Price smiled grimly. Everything we built. All of it. He adjusted the display to show Earth's side of the battlefield. Hayes felt his breath catch. When he had left Earth 3 months ago to return to Meridian Point with the Council's response, Earth's fleet had numbered maybe 200 combat vessels. Now the display showed thousands of contacts. How many? Brooks asked in amazement. 4,632 ships, Price said with pride. Not all of them are as advanced as Council vessels. Most aren't, if we're being honest. But we built them fast. We built them in huge numbers. And every single one is crewed by volunteers who know exactly what they're fighting for. Graham was studying the defensive layout. You've turned the entire solar system into a fortress. The moon has enough railgun batteries to shred anything that gets close, Price confirmed. Mars is armed to the teeth. The asteroid belt is full of mines and automated defense drones. Jupiter's moons have missile platforms. Even Venus has some defensive capabilities now. And the deterrent? Hayes asked quietly. Ready to deploy if needed, Price replied just as quietly. I hope to God we don't need it. A communication signal came through. It was on an open channel, meant to be heard by everyone in the solar system and everyone watching from across the galaxy. This is Chancellor Vormak of the Galactic Council, the familiar voice said. Humanity, you have had 3 months to reconsider your foolish defiance. We have come to offer you one final chance to accept the accords of compliance. Surrender now and we will be merciful. Continue to resist and we will show you why no species defies the Council. Price looked at Hayes. Your call, Captain. You started this. How do you want to answer? Hayes walked to the communication console. Brooks touched his arm gently. Once you respond, there's no going back, she said. I know, Hayes replied. He opened a channel, broadcasting not just to the Council fleet but to every receiver in the galaxy. Hundreds of species would be listening. This was humanity's moment to either back down or commit fully to the path they had chosen. Chancellor Vormak, Hayes said, his voice calm and clear. 3 months ago I told you that humanity would not surrender its freedom. Nothing has changed. We reject your accords. We reject your authority. We reject the entire system that you have built on the oppression of younger species. He paused, letting that sink in. You've brought 1,500 ships to intimidate us. You believe overwhelming force will make us bow. But you don't understand humanity. We don't calculate odds before we defend our freedom. We don't surrender just because the enemy looks stronger. We fight, and we keep fighting until we win or until there's nothing left of us to fight with. Price was pulling up more displays, showing defensive positions activating all across the solar system. Every human ship was moving into position. Every weapon was coming online. Earth was preparing for war. So here's humanity's answer to the Galactic Council, Hayes continued. If you want Earth, you'll have to take it. If you want to enslave us, you'll have to break us first. And I promise you, Chancellor, we will make you pay for every inch of space, for every ship you send against us, for every life you try to take. The cost of destroying humanity will be higher than you can imagine. He closed the channel. The command center was silent for a moment. Then Price started giving orders. All ships, weapons free. Fire on my command. The Council fleet responded exactly as expected. They attacked. The Zarkesh warships accelerated forward, their weapons charging. They expected humanity's small fleet to scatter or retreat. They expected panic and disorder. Instead, they found something else. The human fleet didn't run. They didn't wait for the enemy to come to them. Instead, every ship accelerated forward at maximum speed, racing to meet the Council fleet head-on. It was reckless. It was insane. It was completely human. All ships engage at will, Price ordered. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. Energy beams crossed paths with missile trails. Explosions bloomed in the darkness. The battle had begun. The first exchanges went as expected. Council ships were more advanced, their weapons more powerful, their shields stronger. Human ships died, torn apart by energy weapons or ripped open by focused fire. But for every human ship that died, it took at least one Council ship with it. The human vessels fought with a ferocity that shocked the Council forces. Ships that were damaged didn't retreat. They accelerated toward enemy vessels and rammed them. Crews that were losing used their last moments to position their ships for maximum damage. Every human commander seemed to have orders to take as many enemies with them as possible. Mitchell watched the battle displays with grim satisfaction. They're not ready for this. They're used to civilized warfare where losing ships retreat and damaged vessels pull back. Our people are fighting like every battle is their last. Because it might be, Graham said quietly. The Council's initial assault stalled. They had expected to break through Earth's defenses quickly. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding fight of attrition. For every advance they made, humanity made them pay. The Zarkesh commander tried to pull back and regroup, but the human fleet pursued aggressively, not giving them space to organize. Price watched the tactical displays carefully. They're stronger than us ship to ship, but we're faster and more willing to take risks. They're fighting to punish us. We're fighting to survive. That makes all the difference. Hours passed. The battle continued. Human casualties were horrific. Hundreds of ships were destroyed. Thousands of crew members died. But the Council fleet was bleeding too. They had lost nearly 400 ships and their advance had completely stopped. Then Mitchell's unconventional weapons came into play. The mines disguised as space debris activated, catching Council ships by surprise. Automated drones swarmed damaged vessels. Railgun platforms on the moon opened fire at maximum range, sending solid projectiles at incredible speeds toward the enemy fleet. The Velthari support ships tried to retreat, but they found themselves in the middle of Earth's asteroid belt, where every piece of rock might be hiding a weapon. Several support vessels were destroyed by mines. Others were picked off by human ships that had been hiding among the asteroids. On the third day of fighting, something changed. The Council fleet, which had seemed so confident, began to show signs of coordination problems. The Zarkesh wanted to press the attack harder. The Velthari wanted to withdraw and try a different approach. The other Council species were arguing about tactics. Brooks, who had been monitoring communications, reported to Hayes, "The Council fleet isn't as unified as it looks. Different species have different priorities. The Zarkesh are angry that we're fighting back so effectively. They want to escalate. But others are questioning whether this is worth the cost." "How many ships have they lost?" Hayes asked. Price checked the displays. 732 confirmed destroyed or disabled. Almost half their fleet. And us? 2,300, Price admitted. "We're losing ships faster than they are, but we have more to lose." Hayes looked at the displays showing Earth. The planet was still there, still intact, still free. They had held the line for 3 days against the might of the Galactic Council. "Send a message to the Council fleet," Hayes said. "Tell them we can keep this up longer than they can. Tell them every day they stay here costs them more ships, more resources, more lives. Tell them they can have victory, but it will be the most expensive victory in galactic history." The message was sent. 6 hours later, the Council,